want to talk about collecting a half-cent typeset. We're probably all taught from birth that a typeset can be pretty much anything you want it to be, and to some extent that's true, but because of information that we've learned about how the different half-cents were made and when and by whom and so on, we are now in a position where we can actually define what a proper typeset of half-cents is, and that's what I'm going to try to do today. So what constitutes a typeset? An example of each unique obverse and reverse design. Okay, that's a typeset. Because we're dealing with coins that often have edge ornamentation of various different kinds, we can also say, what about the third side? And we'll talk about the third side very briefly. And the question at the end is, what should you buy if you want to put together a half-cent typeset? I know that a lot of people in this club collect large cents and don't really think too much about half-cents. I think that's a mistake. Half-cents are very interesting in and of themselves. The designs are similar to those of large cents, but they're not exactly the same. And half-cents are all quite rare. The most common half-cent, there's perhaps 8,000 known. The second most common, there's perhaps 6,000 known. There are more 1893 S. Morgan dollars slabbed than there are known examples of the most common half-cent. And 1893 S. Morgan dollars are the king of the series and will cost you thousands even in low grade. You can get a lot of half-cents for far less money than that. So some types are obvious. Auvers of 1800 and 1808 certainly looks the same to me. We would say that this is pretty obvious. These draped bust Obverses were produced 8 years apart, and they are obviously of the same type. Everybody agree with me? Some are not so obvious. These are Liberty caps from 1793, 94, and 95. Are they the same type? It's all Liberty cap. Are they the same type? One of them, the bust faces to the left. Two of them, the bust faces to the right. Are those two the same type? We'll talk about that as well. Some are really hard to be sure about. These are both 1794 Liberty caps. Are these the same type? They look pretty different, don't they? But I will show you that they in fact are the same type, and I'll show you why. There is a way to know for sure. So starting at the beginning, 1793 is a unique type. The head faces left. There are two dies of that year. They are not identical, but they're quite similar, and we know that they constitute a unique type. Here are the two different dies. The one on the left was the first one used. The one on the right was the second one used. They look quite different. In fact, if you see that the hair points to the eye, there's a very large forehead. Here's a much smaller forehead, and the hair points to the L. There's an extra loop of hair down here that's not here. They look like they were made completely differently, but as we now know, they are produced from exactly the same hub. A hub is a die that is used to make dies. Okay, a die that is used to make dies. What I've marked here in the arrowheads are the differences between them. The Liberty pole is in different places. As I already said, the top lock of hair is in different places. The Liberty caps are different. The hair locks are different, and this one exists only in the one die. But the forehead, the eye, the nose, the mouth, the ear, the chin, the throat, the bust line are all exactly the same, which can only be done if they're produced from a hub. And this hub originated not with the half-cent. This was a big surprise, although it shouldn't have been, I guess. Crosby, back in the 1800s, thought that the 1793 half-cent, the wreath cent, and the 1792 dime or dismy were very, very similar. Walter Breen noted a remarkable resemblance between the 1792 dime and 1793 half cent and thought that they must be products of the same hand, in other words, the same engraver. Walter Breen was absolutely correct. Here's the 1792 dime, here's the 1793 half cent. Look at the forehead, the eye, the nose, the mouth, ear. Ear is a little bigger here. The chin, throat, bust look very, very similar between the two. The hair is different. There's no Liberty cap in the dime. This head is much higher in the field, but they look a lot alike. And the reason they look a lot alike is because they were produced from the same hub. Okay, so the hub that was used to make 1793 half cents pre-existed from 1792. And that was one of those things that has been out there in plain sight for everybody for 225 years, and nobody noticed it. Some people were very, very disappointed that they didn't notice it. This is what the hub looked like. Henry Voigt created it. I've left the back part of the head grayed out because we don't know exactly what was there because it's all covered up by hair, and the hair is different on the three dies that were made from it. So that's a hub, and that is what was used to impart the head onto the coin. All the 1793 reverses were hand engraved. And what about the third side? This one reads 200 for $1. So there is a third side as well. Turns out that all of the 1793s have the same edge. So that cannot be anything that affects it. Only one edge device. And thanks, by the way, to Tony Butcher, Russ Butcher's son, for these edge photographs. He did a beautiful job. All 1793s are the same type. All 1794 obverses also are from the same hub, and that was also a surprise. Both Breen and Cohen had written that the first obverse that was used in 1794 was entirely hand engraved, and they didn't agree on whether the last obverse was hand engraved or whether it was from a hub. But it turns out all 5 obverses from 1793 or 94 were produced from the same hub. And what this is an overlay in 3 different channels of the 3 that are called normal heads. We have the so-called gonadroid head, then we have 3 normal heads, and then we have the heavy head or accented hair. These are the 3 normal heads. You can see the hair is a little bit different. That's why we have the psychedelic colors in the hair. But again, the face, the bust, the cap, and the pole are all part of the hub. Here we take the first obverse and the fourth obverse and overlay them, and you can see again that the hair is re-engraved in them, but both heads come from the same hub. And here's the fourth and fifth obverses overlaid. The fifth obverse was double punched, but otherwise it's from the same hub. And this is what that hub probably looked like. It's a reconstruction of Robert Scott's 1794 Auvers Hub. It differed from the one in 1793 in that the cap and the pole are both part of the design. And again, like in 1793, the engraver messed with the hair in each individual die. They also used hubs for the reverses of 1794. The first 3 reverses that were used were all from the same hub, and this is the first, the second, and the third. They look a lot alike, and the reason that they look alike is because every element of the reverse was in the hub. The wreath, the lettering, even the dentals, even the center dot was all in the hub. So the whole thing was created from a hub. This was the Mint's first attempt to use a complete hub for a die. It didn't work very well. There are minor differences due to re-engraving. If you look at this leaf, it points to the C on the first reverse. It does not on the others. And if you look up here at these two leaves, they kind of point at each other on the first and second, but not on the third. This leaf is higher. So even though they're made from the same hub, it's not hard to tell them apart. So these three obviously are a type. And this is an overlay of the three. I mean, even the dentals match. It's amazing. Two reverses were not hubbed. These were hand engraved. They're easy to tell apart. The ribbons here are quite long. They're short here. Here we have leaves that are well separated. Here the leaves just about touch. It's easy to tell those two apart. They're hand engraved, but they're still of a type. Okay, we don't call these a different type from each other. And in fact, you can do an overlay and you see that absolutely nothing matches at all. Okay? STAT matches because I forced it to. Okay? You have to start somewhere, and I did the overlay in such a way that I started with STA, and those three letters matched, but as you can see, absolutely nothing else does. So 1794 has two distinct types. All the obverses were made from the same hub. 3 heavy wreath reverses were made from a hub. 2 cent type reverses were hand engraved. And what about the third side? Well, there are 2 different edge lettering subvarieties. They both say 200 for $1. This is what's called large edge letters, and this is small edge letters. If you look at them side by side, you can see the difference, that these letters are smaller than these. But if you're just looking at one coin, you can still tell these apart. And the way you can tell is that RED of 100, the letters are evenly spaced. With this one, RED, the letters are not evenly spaced, they're widely spaced, and R and E are particularly far apart. So all you need is one to be able to tell whether you're looking at small or large edge letters. So what about that third side? So you need 2 94s. It's relatively easy to get one with the heavy reverse and large edge letters, and that would be 1A or Cohen 1 or Breen 1. It's also relatively easy to get one with the cent type reverse and small edge letters. That would be 4E or Cohen 4. So here are the heads of 1795, 3 obverses. These look like they're from the same hub. What would you say? Yes, no, maybe? Have I scared you? You're not willing to take a stand. They are from the same hub. In fact, this one was made in 1795, this one in 1796, and this one probably in 1797, but it might have been made later. We don't know exactly when this head was produced. If we overlay the 3, matches perfectly. The cap, the entire bust, but not the pole. We see that the 1796 has no pole. And the reason is that there was no pole in the hub. Okay? These 2 poles were hand engraved into the dies. And that's what the hub looked like in 1795. This has been attributed to John Smith Gardner. It's only been attributed to Gardner since Don Taxay's book in 1966. For some reason, Taxay and Breen later after him believed that Robert Scott was a totally incompetent engraver, and once Gardner was hired as assistant engraver, they said he redesigned all the coinage and made everything look better. Well, the fact is, there were letters have been found from Gardner in which he said he never designed any coins. So the whole thing that Taxay and Breen say about these is just not true. This was designed by Robert Scott, and he deserves credit for it. I think it's a very attractive design. It's a lower relief than the 1794, so the coins wore better, they lasted longer, and they stacked better. The reverses were not hubbed in 1795 to 97, But they're all of the cent type, so they're a single type. The third side, there's two different lettered edges, one from 1795, one from 1797, and this famous gripped edge, very, very rare type from 1797. The 1795 lettered edge matches up just about perfectly with the 1794 large edge letters, so I'm quite sure that the same edge dies were used for this as for the large letters of the previous year. 1797 is different. Notice that the coin is thinner because these coins were made to a lighter standard. George Washington changed the weight of the cent and the half cent at the end of 1795, and so the 1797 coins are thinner and lighter. And the gripped edge, people have speculated that this might have been made by a defect in the dies that punch the blanks out, that punch the planchets out. That's not the case, because these went through an upsetting mill, commonly called a Castang press, for the same reason that any type of facial tissue is called a Kleenex. Okay? Castang press is a brand name, and Castang did not make the ones that the Mint used, and so they really shouldn't be called a Castang press. Call it an upsetting mill. But these grips would have been milled flat if they were from the planchet cutter. So these grips have to have come from the upsetting mill itself. So the dies that made the upsetting mill were obviously gripped. So this was somehow intentional. Why, we don't know, but it was intentional. Two edge devices in 95, 3 in 97, because there was a plain edge in 95 and in 97, and of course also in 96. Again, thanks to Tony Butcher, but we only need one coin for our type for 1795 to 7, because they're all from the same Auvers Hub. None of them are hubbed on the reverse, and the edge lettering variants are too rare for a typeset person to spend the amount of money he would have to spend to collect them. So you're off the hook. Drake busts. One type. This is the first slide we looked at. Are these one type? They look like it, don't they? But if we turn them over, here we have 2 leaves at the top. Here we have, 3 leaves at the top. Here we have 2. Everything about this is different from this. The font is a different size. So there obviously are 2 different reverses that were used for the Drake busts. Okay? So Drake bust is not a single type. There are 2 Drake bust types. Hand engraved from 1800 and hubbed from 1802 to 1808. And here's a reconstruction of the 2 hubs that were produced. This one in 1800, the Drake bust. Another very pretty design, I think. And this design eventually was used on a gold coin, the first spouse gold coin for Thomas Jefferson that was made about a decade ago. They copied the half cent for that, because Jefferson was not married when he was president. And the reverse is, I call it a marvel of minimalism, because they put as little as possible into the hub. There's just the leaves, the main stems, and the ribbon. Okay, the stem ends aren't there, the berries aren't there, the stems to the berries aren't there. They put as little as possible into this hub. It makes you wonder why they bothered with it at all, because so much hand finishing was done for each reverse that it was hardly worthwhile to have used a hub at all. You use a hub for the obverse, and I should say this, because to engrave this in the hub takes about a week for a person to do by hand. And if they had to engrave every die, they could only produce 1 obverse die a week. And most of the dies, as you probably are aware, lasted a day or less in coinage. So in other words, they would never be able to keep up with the needs of production if they didn't use hubs. Once you've got your hub, you can make a working die in a day from that. So, and the mint today uses the same process.
How many coins were produced in a day?
It depends what year. In the very beginning, it was about 7,000 to 8,000. By 1795, they were able to do about twice that many, and it didn't change too much after that until they mechanized the entire process in 1836, at which point they could coin about 6,000 coins an hour. Okay? I'm sorry, 6,000, yeah, 6,000 coins an hour. So they could coin as many in an hour as they used to be able to do in a day, roughly. So you need 2 Drake busts. Now it gets even more fun. Here's the classic heads. 1809, this is the first classic head that was produced. It's the Cohen 4, Breen 1, the first obverse that was used from the hub. And this is the 1835, which was the last die produced of the type. Do these look like they're the same type? Do these look like they came from the same hub? Did I hear a no? Do I hear a yes? I don't hear a yes from anybody. In fact, they were produced from the same hub, or at least produced from the same master die, which makes the hub. And I'll show you. That's shocking. You've got this, what they call hub flaw here. Just a little tiny trace of it in the hair. Look at the chin, recedes chin. Here the chin juts out. Here we have this little tiny nose. Here we have this big Roman nose. It really looks different, and you would certainly not think that those were produced from the same hub. Hub flaw, minimal hub flaw, chin recedes, chin juts. Turns out William Neese, who became the engraver in 1825, re-engraved the hub that was used to produce half-cents obsessively. Okay, he did it every year. For other types, he made new hubs, but for the half-cents, he just took the existing either hub or master die, either one, it doesn't matter, and he re-engraved. Here's the first die in 1809. It's got this strong hub flaw. This was the last die used in 1809, and most of it's been engraved away already, the first year. This is 1826. It's about the same as there, and here in 1835, it's just gone. That's just one example. These arrows are in exactly the same place relative to the neck. And you can see how much larger the chin is and the nose. Hub was re-engraved several times. Here are the classic head reverses. This again is the first reverse of 1809 and the last reverse of 1835. They look pretty much the same, except look at that lettering. It's obviously very different. But the wreaths look a lot alike, don't they? Half-cents in the same place, that bar, even the center dots are in the same place. And if you do an overlay, you find that half-cent, the center dot, the bar, and the entire wreath, including the berries and stems, match up perfectly. So the hub, or the hubs that they used, were these two. Here's the Auvers Hub with its hub flaw in its first appearance, and the reverse hub that was used throughout the entire period with no change. So there's no evidence, by the way, that John Reich designed this or any other type. I know there's a John Reich Society, and some of you are probably members. John Reich was hired as assistant engraver. He was hired primarily to make medals. Again, Breen and Taxay said that because Scott was so lousy an engraver that John Reich must have redesigned everything. There's absolutely no evidence that he did, and in the lack of evidence that the assistant designed these things, I think we have to say that the chief engraver probably did it. So we need one classic head from 1809 to 1835. That's easy. Braided hair. New technology at the mint, steam power, 1836. They built a new building, had steam engines. Everything was done by steam power. This gave a lot more power for coining and for making dies, so everything could now be hubbed except the date. And when they started making half cents again, everything was hubbed but the date. Dies were more uniform, less likely to be counterfeited, but they absolutely lacked their primitive charm from before. And I think that's bad. Here's a recreation of Christian Gobrecht's braided hair hubs. First thing you can notice is there's no center dot. The center dot was placed there so that the engraver could use a compass to inscribe where he needed to put the letters. Since the letters are already in the master die, you don't have a center dot, you don't need it. There's no center dot on the obverse either. So here's everything but the date. And it turned out that that was used unchanged from 1840 when they made only proofs through 1857. So we need one braided hair. What do we need for our typeset? 8 coins, just 8 coins. 1793, unfortunately, because that's the expensive one. 1794 heavy wreath, not nearly as expensive, but still not cheap. 1794 cent type wreath, 1795 to 97. Drape bust with the reverse of 1795, that would be either an 1800 or the rare 1802. Drape bust with the reverse of 1802, classic head, and a braided hair. 8 coins. Unfortunately, 4 of them were made in the 18th century. Other considerations. Well, what grade range do you want to collect? Do you want them all to match, or do you want them all to be about the same price? Do you want them all to look good together? Do you want a really beat up, ugly, porous 1793 and an uncirculated braided hair? What grade range to collect? If you want unks, 1793s and 1794s will cost you more than your house, probably. So the cost is very prohibitive for those. If you want them in XF, classic and braided hair you can have for $100 or $200. Drape bust for $500 to $750. The 1794 or 5 to 7 for $5,000 to $10,000. And a 1793, $40,000 to $50,000. Again, more than most cars, or at least more than any car I've ever bought. So if you want to get them in, fine. You can get a classic or braided for $50, and those are still attractive coins. You can get a drape bust for $150. Again, a very attractive coin. The Liberty caps around $1,000. That's getting a little more possible for people. The 1793 will still cost you about $10,000 for a nice fine. The hard thing in collecting a typeset of half cents is to get that 1793 in nice quality. There are a lot of 1793s that are out there that are of very poor quality. They're on very rough planchets or they're beat up. The reason is that, and again, most people don't seem to be aware of this, but when the large cents and half cents were turned in to the mint in exchange for flying eagles in 1857 and thereafter, certain favored Philadelphia coin dealers were allowed to go through all of the coins that were turned in and pull out for face value ones that they thought they might be able to make a profit on. I think it's wonderful that the generous mint supported their business. Wouldn't you love for the generous mint to support your business or the government to support your business? This is a major example of corporate welfare. On the other hand, if the government had not let them do that, it would be almost impossible to find these coins at all, or the colonials as well. So we really do need to thank these gentlemen. The report that Edward Frossard wrote about this talked about the spirit of research that these fine gentlemen did. Their motive was entirely profit, not research, but it allows the rest of us to do good research, and so we do need to thank them. Again, like I said, most people don't believe this, but it's absolutely true.